All right, good morning, everyone. Finally in March 2nd, week 8, lecture 1. Going to talk about our whiteboard, going to talk a little bit more about it than usual today. Today is going to be a very a very different lecture because we're not going to have that much lecture and material. It's mostly going to be talking about what the midterm and the project are going to be like. Of which there are some files available to you now in Canvas. So go and check those out when you have a chance, sooner than later, especially for the project, because as you can see, your project has started as of yesterday, but we'll get there in a minute. All right, so normal stuff first. My math lab homeworks for 3.2 and 3.3 previously assigned, due today for 3.2, and then the 14 for 3.3 since we got that spring break coming up. We will finish 3.4 very quickly this morning. So that's going to be due in, quote, 1 week, which is really 2 weeks, the 16th. I don't like to make things due in the middle of spring break. Just don't think it's fair. I do think you should be working during spring break, but I don't have due dates. Give me a second. All right. And then our newest Excel file, 4.1 budget, and you might see a 4.2 there. They tend to have two numbers for some reason, but it's 4.1 and it says it might go with 4.2, but it says budget. That's going to be due on the 16th as well. Then, as I said a few minutes ago, well, like a minute ago, we are going to go over the project in heavy detail today. Please make sure that you are paying attention, writing down any details you think might be necessary that you don't see on the screen, but I do cover this very, 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 very thoroughly. And the document that you will see, of course, has been provided to you in Canvas. We'll show you where that is later. And what you are going to do for your project is to make a budget, to make a personal budget, to make a personal 1-month budget. And what I mean by that is you're going to list all of the expenses that you have over the month of March, starting with yesterday. So hopefully you can remember any purchases you made yesterday, or any car payments you made, or rent payments, or electric bill payments, or tuition payments, or anything like that. So the dates that you will cover for your 1 month worth of budget will be March 1st through March 31st. And then this will be due on the 6th. Now you might say, how are you only giving me like 6 days to complete my project after I've acquired everything? You can build the Excel spreadsheet day one. You could build everything right now based on formatting and formulas and everything right out of the gate. And then all you're doing for the rest of the month is just, hey, I bought $5 worth of gasoline, which is like what, a third of a gallon right now? That's a joke. On March 2nd, and then put it in. And then on March 3rd, I bought $40 worth of groceries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can actually create the formulas, and you do have to have formulas in your spreadsheet, and the formatting of your rows and columns and charts that you have to make pretty much immediately. The only thing you can't really do until the end is the analysis I ask for, which is just a sentence or a paragraph. But again, we'll see that later. Now, this budget that you will be making is something that you will build from scratch. You start with a blank Excel file. I mentioned this at the beginning of the semester. This feels more like the very first thing we did, where we start with a blank file. This Excel homework that is coincidentally named budget is a normal Excel file that you download from my math app. I'm going to say this 3 times. You are not downloading any Excel files for your project. You are not downloading any Excel files for your project. You're not going to find anything in my math lab. You're not downloading anything for your project. So if you email me and ask me, Mr. Beckner, where do I download the Excel file for the project? I might not even respond to you, and I might just say, hey, go back and watch the lecture. Please pay attention to the details. So when I have the video going later, it is just generalized. So it'll say see dates in intro or in Canvas, and I'll write on screen at that point that it's March 1st through March 31st. But again, it's the month of March. That is what you're going to keep track of. The whole point of this is you could use this month of March, and then you could copy paste it or just create a new tab in your Excel file, copy paste it, and then you can do this for April, and then May, and then June, and then July, and you can keep track of all of your expenses. We'll also talk about how we can prorate expenses, things that might not come up every single month, like maybe you pay your water bill every other month. Maybe you pay your home insurance annually because you outright own your home. Maybe you pay your car insurance every 6 months because you get a slight discount that way. So when you have big quarterly or semi-annually or annual expenses like that, so that you don't feel like you're getting hit with $600 all at once, you can budget for this and prorate it and say, hey, I'm only paying $100 in January, $100 in February, $100 in March, something like that, instead of $600 in June or July. And even though you won't have withdrawn the money from your account, you will have budgeted for it, you will have accounted for it, so it doesn't feel like a $600 hit all at once. And you could even like take that money and put it to a separate account. So it does feel like, it does more feel like you took the money out $100 at a time. So the other thing that we'll talk about lightly is the midterm. And again, the project files are in Canvas, and we'll show that later. The midterm, as mentioned previously, will cover chapters 1 through 4. We're going to be starting chapter 4 very soon. So, after spring break. And we will give you the midterm exactly 1 week after finishing 4.4. The midterm will not be taken during class. This will be taken on your own time, like a homework or Excel file. But you will, once you open the midterm, you have to finish in one setting, whatever. It's going to be 20 to 25 questions. There is a review provided in Canvas that is already there. So there are 2 new tabs of Canvas that have been opened today, one being the project tab and one being the midterm tab. In the midterm review tab, the review tab, it'll have a topics file, and then it will have an actual assignment file. It's not graded. It will give you questions and answers. You're responsible for doing all the work in between. Again, I'm not grading this, but I highly suggest doing it because I basically take these 40 or 45 questions, change the numbers, cut half of them out, and boom, there's your midterm. So doing the review will be very, very, very important for understanding the midterm because it'll give you an idea of what to focus on. So the review is about twice as long as the midterm itself. I also put an extremely short formula sheet in that review section that you can use. It is just a couple of conversion formulas because I said you have to memorize anything having to do with time. You have to memorize all those basic formulas we've gone over throughout the semester, like weighted average, how to calculate, all sorts of different things that I'm not going to talk about right now. And the midterm will be available for 2 days. And once we finish the chapter 4 material, I'll say, hey, it's going to be available this Monday and Tuesday or this Wednesday and Thursday. That's the combination of days that will be available, either a Monday, Tuesday, or a Wednesday, Thursday. When you open it, you will have 2 hours to complete it. I do suggest that you show as much work as possible with pencil and paper or whiteboard if you've got access to a whiteboard. Make sure your name is on those pages or whiteboard. Then you can take pictures of it, scan it, make a PDF, make an image file, whatever, and you'll have to submit it in Canvas. Now that is only going to be available the days of the midterm because I don't want you submitting wrong things before that. You only get 1 submission, so make sure you get it right. You can upload multiple pages at once. It's not a problem. But you will have to submit your work within 15 minutes to make sure there's no funny business going on. I do reserve the right to give you a 0 if you either A, don't submit your work at all, or B, submit it 30 minutes later or an hour later or 2 hours later, arguably even 16 minutes later. But if it's 16 minutes, am I really, do you think I'm that evil that I'm not going to take it? If you're having some kind of technology issue, you can email it to me. I really don't want to get 200 emails with pieces of work though. So I will still ask you to submit it in Canvas if you end up emailing it to me, but that's just a last resort, an absolute last resort. So we'll talk about the midterm a little bit more as it closes in. But for now, what we're going to do is talk about the last topic from 3.4, which is going to be densities. Then we'll get into all the grand details of the project, talk about the 6 main things you're responsible for, mainly creating rows and columns in an appropriate manner, creating formulas appropriately, creating a chart, creating an analysis, which is really just a sentence or a paragraph, and how to do some prorated stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and get into that. So we've done everything from chapter 3 except for density, and here we are. So density is a ratio. Oh my, a ratio? What is that? I've never seen a ratio before in my life. Well, that's just a bold-faced lie if you're in this class. Ratio, fraction. So density is a fraction. As I've said, everything from chapters 2, 3, and 4 on one level or another is some type of ratio. A lot of these ratios end up being proportions. We kind of extended the idea of proportions into things that we say we can't really do the fraction equals a fraction, but we can at least still relate them to each other. But another ratio, what is this the ratio of? It's not just apples to oranges, it's not students to teachers, it's specifically talking about an object's mass to its volume. Now, I want to kind of point out here that very often we'll actually use weight to volume. And you might be thinking, well, Mr. Beckner, weight and mass are the same thing. And that is not true, but it's also my point that most people feel like mass and weight are the same thing. Now, as long as we stay on planet Earth, your mass would have a direct correlation to your weight, and it would be consistent no matter what part of Earth you're on. But if we go to another planet, your mass would actually stay the same, but your weight would change, because weight is affected by the gravitational constant of the planet you're on. For instance, Earth is 9.8 meters per second squared. Now you might go, meters per second squared, aren't things usually in meters per second? Good observation. Meters per second is a speed. Meters per second squared is an acceleration. So that gravitational force value, that constant of 9.8 meters per second squared, is not a speed, it's an acceleration. Now, we don't have to worry about what that means. That's not the point of this. I'm just trying to say that that number, that 9.8, if you go to the moon, it's lower. If you go to Mars, it's kind of in between Earth and the moon. If you went to Saturn, it would be much larger. If you were ridiculously close to the sun, it would be in the thousands or tens of thousands or millions, or I don't even honestly know, because I'm not trying to go stand too close to the sun. I'm not Icarus. So again, while your mass and your weight are technically two different values with two different types of units, and one of them is affected by the planet you're on, we kind of use them interchangeably. So when you're in England and you say, oh, I weigh 100 kilograms, that's a mass. But when you're in America and you say that I weigh 220 pounds, that's a weight. So the American system is a weight, but the non-American system, the thing that everybody else uses, is a mass. So that is the reason that I feel like most people find these two to be interchangeable. And you're probably not ever going to leave planet Earth in your lifetime. Notice I said probably. I can't make giant assumptions, but statistically it's probably true. So you're gonna be like, well, mass and weight are the same thing to me. In fact, one country uses mass and another country uses weight. So why aren't they interchangeable? So again, if you're gonna be in a science class, I would not be doing this, but in a QR class for just a concept of a ratio of something that measures your mass or weight to your volume, which is the amount of space you take up, or an object. It doesn't have to be you yourself. So that's just the ratio. So if they give you a measurement in feet or inches or miles, not cubic units like cubic feet, cubic inches, cubic miles, which is volume is always measured in, you're going to have to convert them. Now, this is pretty rare in most instances in the real world. If I give you some oddly shaped object, I would probably have to tell you what its volume is, because you're not going to know the formula to find the volume of that shape. But in our class, I can say, oh, here's a cube, or here's a box with these three dimensions, and then you could find the volume by just using an appropriate formula. So I will admit this is not super necessary unless you're going between cubic inches to cubic feet if they ask for a change like that. But I still want to remind us of the way we convert things that way. You can cube both sides of the conversion factor, or you can also just multiply by the same factor 3 times, as we saw in 3.1. So again, not really going to focus on this issue here, although you'll think we are, because you see this thing just says 2 feet. It doesn't say 2 cubic feet. And that's because it's what I alluded to earlier. We're only measuring one side, and it is a cube. Okay. So let's get to the example. A box of supplies weighs 42 pounds. So we've got some box, and hold on, that pen's being weird. We got some box. We'll leave a little space for the actual problem. Here's our box. Now,
I'm going to assume this is a cubic box because it says if the box has equal dimensions on all sides. Now you might be like, Mr. Beckner, that doesn't look like a cube. Please ignore my poor artistic ability. It's a cube. So this box weighs 42 pounds in total. The whole thing is 42 pounds. So if you put that box on a scale, it comes out to 42 pounds exactly. Now this box has equal dimensions, and we get out our measuring tape and we measured one side to be 2 feet. So if you go from end to end, so again from here to here, that height would be 2 feet. Or you could go from end to end horizontally, and this width would be 2 feet from end to end. Or if you measured this distance right here, this distance would also be 2 feet. So it's 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. And I know this doesn't look like 2 in comparison to this, and that's because we're looking at this box mostly from a forward perspective. So we're just barely peeking around the corner to see that it's an actual three-dimensional shape here. All right, so the box has equal dimensions, and they say, what is the density of the box? And I say, note, you still need to convert your units, but it's not going to feel like a conversion problem. It's just going to feel like finding a volume, because the density is the ratio of mass to volume or weight to volume. We're going to use weight. Again, this is not technically true, but good enough for a QR sake. So again, I said you have to convert your units, but that's just because we got to find the volume based on the fact that it's a 2 by 2 by 2 box. So the first thing we're going to do is find the volume, which is 2 feet times 2 feet times 2 feet. How do I know that? Because the volume of a cube is length times width times height. That is a geometric formula I do expect you to know. The volume of a box is length times width times height. I'm not going to ask you to memorize the volume of a sphere or a cone or a three-dimensional triangle or any kind of, or pyramid. I don't know why I said triangle. Pyramid. I'm not going to ask you to memorize any of those goofy shapes, but you do need to understand the basic concept of two-dimensional and three-dimensional shapes. Area for a rectangle is length times width. Volume for a box, length times width times height. Now check this out. The 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And some person might say this is 8 feet, and it's wrong, because you have feet times feet times feet, which is feet cubed. It's like having 3 times 3 times 3 is 3 cubed, or x times x times x is x cubed. So that's it. There's our volume. So how do we find the density? The density is just the ratio of mass or weight, whichever you're given. Again, technically it's only mass, but in here we can use weight as we're about to do. So how do I know which way to divide them? Do I do weight divided by volume, or do I do volume divided by weight? The formula says the volume goes on the bottom. If you do these backwards, it's wrong. Volume must go on the bottom. So the 8 feet cubed, or 8 cubic feet, must go on the bottom. And the weight, which we said was 42 pounds, or the mass if we had it in, say, kilograms, was the 42 pounds. Again, like I said, it's very interesting because pounds is a weight, but kilograms is a mass. Your mass in kilograms is the same on the moon, is the same on Jupiter, is the same on Mars, is the same on Earth, but your weight in pounds would be different because they take into account the gravity. I know it's weird, just go with it. So we do 42 divided by 8, and let's see how, if we have to round it all. Spoilers, we won't. We get 5.25. So 5.25 is the answer, right? Maybe if we're not a quantitative reasoning student, no. As a quantitative reasoning student, that's wrong. 5.25 what? 5.25 oranges, 5.25 bobs, 5.25 oranges per bob? No, it's 5.2, that's an ugly 2, isn't it? 5 pounds per cubic foot. Or you could write with the word 5.25 lbs per cubic foot. Hello. That looks like a 2, but it's a 3. I had some gunk on my tablet, apparently. So there's our answer. Again, either of these is perfectly fine. Both mean the same thing, whether you write the units in fraction form or with a per form. So what does this mean? What is the point of this problem? What's the uniqueness of finding a density, or what's the reasoning to find a density? I don't know why I said uniqueness. Let's say this box was filled of just one object. It's filled with a bunch of marbles or something like that, or a bunch of sand, or I don't know, a bunch of very hollow beads, whatever. So this box is filled to the brim with the substance, and you go, well, I just hurt my back, so I don't really want to carry 42 pounds right now. But this is 2 by 2 by 2. What if I were to maybe slice this box? So I'm going to slice this box like so. Be careful this way. So that each of these little red boxes is 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. So again, this right here, each of these, oops, I got a little crazy on that one, didn't I? Just trying to emphasize, this little cube right here, which of course has, if you wanted to see through the cube, there's the whole thing. That's a 1 by 1 by 1, and there would be 8 of these. There's 1 here, 2, 3, 4 in the face, and then on the back side, there's 1, 2, and then 3, and then 4 behind it. So there would be 8 of these little 1 by 1s. 1 by 1 by 1. And each would have 5.25 pounds in it. That's what you can do with the concept of a density. You can break this down into smaller things. Now, do you have little 1 by 1 by 1 boxes? Because you certainly can't just take an open box and go from a 2 by 2 by 2 to a 1 by 1 to 8 of these 1 by 1 by 1s. You'd have to have 8 1 by 1 by 1 boxes. But again, let's say 42 pounds is too much for you to handle with your back and this, bigger, more awkward 2 by 2 by 2 box. So you go, all right, well, let me instead buy 8 smaller boxes, fill them up with this equally distributed object, and then you'll have 8 boxes with 5.25 pounds. And if you took 8 times 5.25, guess what you get? 42 pounds. That kind of goes in line with that concentration idea that whether you have 1 box with 42 pounds that's 2 by 2 by 2, or 8 boxes that are 1 by 1 by 1, 5.25 pounds in each, you still have the total amount of the thing at the end of the day. Now, if you're filling these boxes with DVDs and weights and water jugs and things that are not equally distributed, you'd have a much harder time doing this equally, but you could at least still say, let me go get 8 boxes and just try and put about 5 pounds in each, and then everything would be, again, much easier to carry on your poor old back or young back. Maybe you had an accident, I don't know, lifting too much weight at the gym from all that protein powder from a chapter ago. So densities of objects in the real world are not always equally distributed, like I said. If you have a box full of beads or sand or something like that, it's all the same thing and it's filled to the top, then that's an equal distribution of weight most likely. But if you've got a box with a 10-pound dumbbell in it and a calculator in it, you're not going to be able to equally distribute those weights if you try and put it in 2 boxes, 1 box with the 10-pound dumbbell and 1 with the, what did I say, a calculator, I think? Obviously, the calculator box is going to be lighter because those weights don't have the same densities. Think about it like a balloon versus a bowling ball. You could have a balloon the size of a bowling ball, but the bowling ball is a lot denser. The material inside of it is heavier. So even though they're the same size, they have different densities because their sizes, while the same, their weights or masses are different. So the bowling ball is denser, whereas that balloon is very, very, very not dense. All right. So with that said, that will close out chapter 3.
Just give me a second. I'm setting up for our project discussion.
Right. So I want to take a solid amount of time and talk about our project. Now, I know this is project one. It could be our only project. It could be one of multiple projects. It just depends how the course is going. Um, and I would have said this to you. You will find your due date in the intro of a live lecture, as well as in Canvas, and the Canvas due date will be the whole time. This talk is just to keep things a little more generic for my various classes, since I teach this more than once each semester. So let's see what we got here. Each student is responsible for creating a monthly budget of all of their expenses for the month of, and just a couple words I might have to take out for the month assigned. Now, it does not have to be a specific month. Now, you notice that I had November written there. So once in the past, it was the month of November. I've done the month of February. I've done the month of June. I've done split months, like say January 16th to February 15th, or December 20th through January 19th, something like that. So that will also be something that is detailed in Canvas, and in the intro, you'll find this file in Canvas where it will have your exact dates. So each student is responsible for creating a monthly budget of all their expenses for the month assigned. And again, it doesn't have to be just a February, it could be a split month, like we said, March 15th to April 14th, something like that maybe. If you do not spend money regularly, you need to ask your parents or your spouse or whoever you have close to you who is basically giving you the financial assist what they are spending on you each day. Now, some parents or spouses or brothers or whatever might consider this to be nosy, and they don't want to tell you these numbers, and that's the lifestyle that they choose to live. I would love for all of us to be in a society where we can openly talk about our finances a little more, but I'm also not going to tell anybody what to actually do with their lives, as you already know. So, besides do your homework, that's what I will tell you. So if you are in a situation where someone does not want to tell you what they're spending on you, then you can see I have an all caps the sentence after that. Just make up your own numbers if absolutely necessary. Um, I'm not going to be grading this based on, oh, you spent too much on video games this month, or you spent too much on your car, or you spent too much on this, or too much on that, or too much on this, or you didn't spend enough on this. That's not what the grade is going to be about. The grade will have absolutely nothing to do with the expenses. The grade will be based around, did you do the 6 things that I asked for that we'll slowly go over? Did you use Excel formulas appropriately? Did all of the calculations, add out correct, multiply out correct, whatever operations they're supposed to be doing? Did you make your charts? Did you make an analysis? That's what you're going to be graded on. I don't care if I have student A who has $10,000 worth of expenses in a month and student B who's got $10 worth of expenses in a month. That's not what's being graded on. Again, it's, did you actually do this task? What the purpose of this is for you to have something that you can use the next month and the next month and the next month and the next month to keep a good record for yourself, to understand where your money is going and where it's coming from each and every month, as well as to I don't want to say introduce the idea of prorated expenses, but to kind of get you used to them as well. So again, this is not going to be graded on the fact that oh man, you only bought 7 things this month, or you bought 200 things this month. That's not what's graded on, although I do have some minimums, as we'll see. Rows should be the days of your month. Columns should be your different categories. The furthest right column should be your total daily expense. Now remember, rows are horizontal, columns are vertical. You have to get this right. Every semester I get maybe 1, maybe 2 students who get this wrong, and you get punished in the point department because of that. So row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6, column A, column B, column C, column D. So again, what we've said, let me just kind of shrink this so we can see a little bit of everything. Sure, there we go. Rows should be the days of your month. Row 1, row 2, row 3, you can see those. Columns should be your different categories. Column A, column B, column C, column D. So if your project was supposed to start on, say, December 1st and end on December 31st, which I would never have done because that would be over a break for standard semesters, but let's just say that would be the case, then you're probably not going to start in this block because you're going to have a column of labels and a row of labels for these things. So actual data doesn't really, like numbers and things, won't get put into until you get into like this section and further right and further down, of course. But again, you must have your rows and columns labeled appropriately. If they are flip-flopped, you will be penalized for that. And it won't be a small penalty either, because, I mean, this is 2 of 6 issues of the whole thing. So I could arguably take up to about 20 points for that. Okay, if you have more than 19 categories. So what's a category? Well, a category is what you decide to call it. I'm not going to say that everyone has to have a category called rent. I'm not going to say that everybody has to have a category called mortgage, because some of you have rents and some of you have mortgages. You could just call it roof if you want to. I'm not going to sit here and analyze the name of the category just to make sure that you have something that represents, well, you should be paying for, quote, roof somewhere, probably, unless you've inherited a house. And if you have, you still have your taxes and insurance. So you could still call that, quote, roof or rent or mortgage or house payment or whatever you like. So if you have more than 19 categories, because some of us have lots of various expenses, and especially if you decide to have a category for fast food, a category for dining out, a category for grocery bills, another person might just have one category and call the whole thing food and lump all 3 of those together. Some of you might just have a category for groceries and then another category for all other eating. So eating at McDonald's or eating at Olive Garden or eating at, I don't know, I was going to try and think of some nice little local spot, but it doesn't really matter. So again, one student might have 3 different categories of food, another student might have 2 categories of food, another student might have just 1 category of food, but everyone better have a category of food because we all got to eat. And food is not free. All right, so if you end up with more than 19 categories, I don't need you to go into 20, 30, 40 different categories because then your Excel spreadsheet is going to get really, really wide. So just call the last one, the 20th one, miscellaneous, and then lump everything else into that. And again, I don't necessarily care how you're dividing this out. I don't care if the food category is before the rent category or vice versa. It's just if you end up needing more than 19 categories, call the 20th one miscellaneous, and then just lump everything in there. Whenever you have a miscellaneous expense, if you could, to the right of that total daily expense, you could just make a little memo and say, hey, this miscellaneous expense was for, I don't know, paper clips, or this miscellaneous expense was for a calculator. I don't know. Some of you, I would say probably half of you maybe won't even have this miscellaneous category because you'll only have 10 or 12. Please note that I say there is a minimum of 6 categories. If you do any less than 6 categories, that's when I start to take away points from your grade. Now you might be saying, Mr. Beckner, I only paid for 3 things this whole month. So make it up then. Again, if you can't meet these minimums or you can't get the information from someone, then just make it up. But understand that in your life, you will be paying for this stuff eventually. So have this sitting to the side, ready to go once you can start building your own expenses and your own budget. So made up numbers are okay for now, but just know that you should try and use this in a real fashion at some point. And by the way, if I haven't already made this clear, I do not care what your numbers are at all. When I go to grade these, I have a method to grade them completely randomly as long as you don't stick your name inside of the Excel file in a cell somewhere. So I'm not going to be sitting here judging you for your expenses or anything like that. Your grades will 100% be based off of completely anonymous information. And again, I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, well, yeah, Alex is spending $400 on this product and Jane is spending $1,000 on that product. And look at Bob, he's spending $100 on lotto tickets every month. Get out of here, Bob. No, that's not what I'm doing. Again, I have no judgment here at all. We are all in different financial positions, and I really do not care about your expense portfolio, your monthly budget, any of that stuff. I just want you to use this for your personal growth. And when you're done with this course, months from now, years from now, if you don't want to use this exact format of an Excel spreadsheet for your budget, go online and find a website that has something that could be helpful. There are a bunch of different budgeting websites out there, and I'm not going to advertise for any of them at this moment, but I'm pretty sure Google could find you one pretty easily, one or two or three or four. So again, for the categories, you can combine some things. We've kind of talked about that food. You can expand some things. It's up to you how specific or non-specific you want to be, as long as you have at least 6 categories. Now, categories can be lots of different things besides food and rent. You have medical expenses, you have vehicle expenses. You could break down the vehicle expenses into multiple categories. You have insurances. I said medical stuff already. You have textbooks you have to buy. You've got courses you have to pay for, clothing, food, investments, if you wanted to call that an expense, because it would be paying off a loan, paying off your credit card. You could be a category as well. Okay, so hopefully that clarifies that. Now, if your expenses vary wildly from month to month, which if they don't now, they will at some point in your life, especially if you own a home. Medical expenses, you break a leg, all of a sudden you got a couple $1,000s to pay. You need some fancy surgery, even with insurance, $10,000. So that would be a case of something varying wildly. If you own your own home and you got a really bad leak, and you get the inspector out and it turns out he goes, well, this roof is 29 years old and it's seen about 15 hurricanes. It's time to replace this. And then that's, $6 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand, depending on your home, depending on whether you're doing the construction or hiring it out, that kind of stuff. So yeah, your January, you might spend $1,000. Your February, you might spend $1,200. Your March, you might spend $800. But then April, that roof bill comes in and your $1,000 monthly bill is now like $1,100 because you got 10 grand on top of that. You might say, well, Mr. Beckner, I'm getting a loan for that. So, that's not going to be technically an expense. Then I just add in that loan payment. Sure. But you could also maybe have saved cash away because these big expenses come up eventually, and then you're able to just conveniently slap 10 grand down on the table, get your new roof, and no loan, no paying 3 or 5 or 10% APR monthly payments for 5 years, 10 years, who knows? And then by the time you get that loan paid down, it's time to slap another roof on the house. Who knows? So what is the point of this rant? So if your expenses vary wildly from month to month, consider every possible expense you have. Things like your car insurance, your taxes, your doctor's visits, your prescriptions, your house repairs, car repairs that could be done in quarterly or annually or semi-annually or all sorts of different installments. So car insurance, a lot of people pay this twice a year because if they pay it monthly, they have to pay just a little more. There's basically a premium bump. But if you pay it semi-annually, which means every 6 months or twice per year, then they might save you like $30 or $40, and in the long run, that can be worth it. All right, so if your car insurance comes in January and July, that means you might have like a $400 bill in January, but then nothing February, March, April, May, or June. So it seems like your January expenses are significantly higher, but that's because you're paying this big lump sum in January that's going to cover you for February, March, April, May, June. So let me give a simpler example. Let's say that your car insurance was pretty cheap and it was $360 a month. At least that's cheap relative to someone in their mid-30s and male and doesn't have a horrible track record on the road. Someone else, maybe $720 is cheap. But let's just say you paid $360 for 6 months worth of car insurance. So if you take that $360 and divide it by the number of months it's covered for, so you're doing dollars divided by months, you would get a value per month. It's a simple rate like we talked about in chapter 3. So 360 divided by 6 would be 60. So your $360 you pay in January that covers you through January, February, March, April, May, June, in reality is much more like a $60 expense January, a $60 expense February, a $60 expense March, and 60 in April, 60 in May, and 60 in June. You just have to front the cost. So for myself, if I were the student doing this monthly budget, and I have my own monthly budgets, and this is exactly how I do it, I would not say that I paid $360 in January. I would say I paid $60 in January. And then in my February budget, I would have that $60 allocated. In March, I would have that $60 allocated, and I would have, quote, prorated car insurance. Now, again, in reality, when that bill comes, yes, I'm $360 broker in January and then again in July, but we set that cash aside throughout the previous 5 months. That way, when we're ready to pay it, it doesn't feel like it's a big deal. And then over the next 5 months, we build that $360 back up so that we can pay the $360 again in July. And then through July and then July through December, we save another $360 to pay it in January. Vehicles, staying in this realm, okay, you drive your car for 5 years, 10 years, whatever. All of a sudden, you need a new timing belt or timing chain after 100,000 miles or whatever your vehicle might require. And they go, oh, okay, well, if you're going to do the timing belt, we might as well do the water pump while we're in here for most cars. And all of a sudden, you've got a $1,000 or $1,500 vehicle expense. And you go, oh no, well, I wasn't expecting this. What do I do? Well, you consider the fact that you know your car is going to cost you a lot of money at some point. So just like that insurance, you're setting aside maybe $100 a month or $150 a month. And you won't be able to guess this exact number without life experience and being used to the same car. But with practice and manipulation, you can get this whittled down better. So, oh, okay, I'm going to put $100 away a month, $100 away, $100 away, $100 away. Now this is for oil changes and tires and random breakdowns and whatever. So after 3 years of me storing away $100 or you storing away $100, now some of that money's been taken out for oil changes and tires and inspections and whatnot. But then hopefully when it's time to replace that timing belt and water pump and whatever else they're going to fiddle around with, you've got that $1,500 sitting in the bank because you consider these prorated style expenses. And you can say, oh, well, I don't necessarily, yeah, I have this $1,500 expense in the month of March, but in my monthly budget, I've been setting aside 100 or 150 or 80 or however many dollars. So that's what I'm talking about if your expenses vary wildly. Now, some of us, this is not an issue, so don't worry about it. But again, just know that in your future, this is likely to be you as well. Now I orally talked about taking a semi-annual car insurance and turning it into monthly. Here you have a vehicle property tax of $240 per year. Now there's 12 months in a year, so you divide by 12, so that gives you $20 per month as a rate. So vehicle property tax is another thing that comes in typically once per year. You're not paying your vehicle property tax monthly unless you're in some weird situation that I have not seen before. If you outright own your own home, you're not making a mortgage payment, which I know is not a lot of people out there, but your taxes come quarterly or every other month or semi-annually, depending on the city. Your insurance bill comes annually. So these are other expenses that you might want to prorate. So I've said that this idea of prorating your expenses is not mandatory, but it is highly recommended for your personal life to consider things like that. So again, prorated expenses, a very, very important concept moving forward in your life, especially for the idea of storing away some acorns for a rainy, cold winter day or something like that. Now, I do say that I need you to list at least one prorated expense in your budget or lose 20 points. I used to actually do an entirely second part of this project, which people messed up more than actually got it right, unfortunately. So I've kind of axed that and just said, all right, you have to put at least one prorated expense in there, and please make sure that I know which one it is. So have a little memo somewhere. It says, hey, this expense on March 1st, or this expense on January 1st, or this expense on August 15th was my prorated expense. So that is a significant point loss if you don't do it. Now, once again, If you don't have any of these expenses, if you are living off of someone else and they won't tell you these numbers, they won't tell you how much your rent is, your portion of rent, what it would be if you were paying it, or how much your gas bill is, or your electric bill, or water bill, or trash bill, or anything like that, just make it up. I don't care. I'm not going to call up your parents and say, did Bob actually spend $25 this month on blah, blah, blah? You can completely lie to me about every single number. Again, that's not what I'm grading you on. All right, so I did mention earlier, I want to pop back up here with the rows and the columns. The rows should be the days of the month, and please make sure the month and the day are labeled. Remember that there are quick ways in Excel to make that progress without having to type out 30 or 31 of those. You just have to do one or maybe two, and then you can use a fill handle probably, depending on how you format things. But I said that the furthest right column should be your total daily expense. So this is another thing, if you miss it, that's significant points lost. So maybe on January 1st, you spent $5 at the corner store, and then you spent $20 on groceries. So there in that total column on the far right column, it should say $25. Now, it shouldn't say $25 because you literally typed 25 there. Remember, total columns in Excel are meant to be used with formulas. You should only have to type one formula for that column and you should be able to fill it down. If you don't do that, you will lose 100% of the points for that total column. So if you're typing a different formula for each row, if you type a formula for January 2nd, and then you type a formula for January 3rd, and then you type a formula for January 4th, that's wrong, 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 wrong. You should have only had, if your month was January, you should have only had to type a formula for the month of January, or sorry, for January 1st, and then just fill it down for the rest of January. Easy as that. Just like we emphasize with the Excel homework. So here's something I need you to understand with that. I might go in your Excel file and completely change your numbers, and I'll say, nah, Bob didn't spend $20 on groceries that day. He spent $25 on this other category. And I'm going to watch your total column and see if it changes. And if it doesn't, then you're in trouble. Or I can just, double click on your formulas and see what they have, and I can instantly tell whether it's right or wrong. But I just need you to understand that. This is supposed to be set up for super easy future use. So when you use this for the next month and the next month and the next month, you just put in, oh, on February 15th, I had $15 of groceries. On February 16th, I spent $40 on my cell phone bill. And then all those totals just change with the snap of a finger. All right. So we said the last column should be a total of daily expenses. Down here on spot number 4, which means number 3 was this. I don't know why that changed. 1, 2, yeah, there we go. 3. So here we are at 4. Your last row should be the sum of each category. The last row should be the sum of each category. So this means I want to see what your monthly expenses are for your groceries. I want to see what your monthly expenses are for your fast food, or I want to see what your monthly car expenses are, however you're labeling your categories. So that way, if you went to the grocery store 5 times on this very last row, you can see how much you spent on groceries that month. Or if you have a column for fast food and you hit up Chick-fil-A, let's say 23 times, you're going to see how much you spent on Chick-fil-A or all your fast food altogether. And then some of these numbers might scare you a little, and that's half of the point of this. Because these small expenses that you might do every day add up. So you'll have a total column and you'll have a total row. The column would be the sum of the days. The total row would be the sum of a category. Next, I want you to create a pie chart, big fan of this for budgets, that will include every expense category with the exception of the sum of daily expenses. We've talked about with pie charts why you don't want to have the regular categories and then a sum category. This was very early in the semester. So your pie chart should just be based on the categories using the totals from part 4. So in other words, you will create your pie chart based off of the last row, which is the sum of each category. So your pie chart is only based off of a single row, the last row, and it's the sum of each category. So that way you'll have a slice for groceries, you'll have a slice for cell phone bill, you have a slice for rent, you'll have a slice for, again, however you're labeling your categories. Now remember, with pie charts, the idea here is that pie charts give you a visual representation of percents. So when you're labeling your pie charts, when you go through that labeling process, make sure they are labeled as expenses. I'm sorry, as percentages. So in the pie chart, I don't want to see that you spent $1,200 on your rent. I want to see that your rent was 31% of your expenses. I also need to make sure, you need to make sure that your charts are well labeled. So when you have your pie chart, if they just say category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, nope, you're going to lose points for that. It should have, all right, the red one is food, the green one is your rent, the blue one is your car expenses, the orange one is your medical expense. Not those specific colors, the specific categories. You get the point, I hope. So this is the bulk of your work. You got to have your specific days and month, days of the month, or months if we split the month, labeled. You've got to have at least 6 categories, at least 6 categories. You need to have a column for your totals for each day. You need to have a row for the total of each category. You need a pie chart based on that total for each category, labeled appropriately. And then the very last thing we have you do is a quick analysis. And this analysis can go anywhere in the Excel chart. Keep it in the main section of the screen. Just find one cell, click there, and type a sentence, a paragraph, whatever. Please don't just type 2 or 3 words. I at least need a sentence. A paragraph would be cool, but a sentence or 2 is perfectly fine. So make an analysis of your monthly expenses. So this could be you saying, I think I'm putting enough away to my investments or my savings account, or I think I'm spending too much on my Carrera GT or whatever. Maybe I need to spend less on my rent, or maybe I need to spend less on fast food, or maybe I need to spend a little bit more on this category because my clothes are ratty or something. I don't know. Now, I don't need to know any kind of checking account or savings account numbers. This is not a budget where you're starting out with, oh, I've got $500 in my checking account and adding and subtracting that. No, this is just showing you what you've spent in a month. So this is not necessarily having to do with incomes. Now, outside of this course, could you modify it to do that? Yes, absolutely. That would be a great idea to modify that. And then, so you make your spreadsheet and say it took up all this space, and then let's say this was January, and then you say, all right, well now I want to do this for February. So you use the plus sign, you go back to sheet 1, you can copy all the information there, paste it here, and all you'd really have to do is change your days and months and maybe your categories, I don't know. Delete the old numbers and put your new numbers in. And then that total column should still be adding everything up correctly. Your total row should be still adding up everything correctly, and everything will be fine. And then you can go to March, and then April, and then May, and then June. And I've had students say, well, that's annoying to have to keep copying and pasting. That's less annoying than starting the whole thing over, I'd say. So again, what I really like about this project is that it's going to get you to become aware of what you're spending every month, because I find that most people are not aware of this. And that could enable you to say, oh, well, maybe I'm spending too much on this one category. Like I will even spoil this one that's very common as, man, if I spend a little more on groceries and cooking at home and a little less on dining out or fast food or Starbucks coffee or anything like that, maybe I could take that money and put it somewhere else, like a savings account or an investment account, or put it towards a future car or a future, anything. Because as we will see in these later chapters, when we really start talking about compound interest, small savings each day, each month, each year over a long period of time, when invested, can turn us into a millionaire with enough time, effort, and knowledge. So that little $3 you might be saving yourself a day, if you can do that for 50 years, you can make bank off of that as long as you're doing the right thing with it. You're not sticking it in a CD, or you're not just leaving it in a 0.01% interest rate checking account, something like that. Okay. Oops, wrong thing. That's not what I wanted. Ignore that. So You will be submitting this in Canvas. You also find the downloadable file that we were just looking at in Canvas. So when you log into your Canvas shell, I'm in the student view right now, you'll see about halfway down under your quizzes and everything, there's that project category. And if this is not available yet, just give it one more day and it should be available. And obviously yours will not say fall 2020, that is the past. I'm just using this as a visual example, but you'll see two main spots in the project. You'll see one spot for the actual file to download. So if I click this, it would take me to the page where I'll see that and be able to download it. And it would be this, except it would have your actual due date here. It will have the specific month that you're going to be working on here. So those details will be seen in the downloadable file of Canvas. Under that link, you will see the link to submit your project here. Now this has to be an Excel file. It cannot be any other fancy spreadsheet file. As we've talked about all semester long, it does need to be an Excel file. This is not auto-graded. I will have to go in and grade these, so it'll probably be a week or week and a half before I get to these because I get a lot of projects all at once and they are time-consuming to grade. So please be patient with me in that regard. But that's where you'll submit it. So you'd click there. And then you hit the button that says submit assignment, and then it'll take you to a screen where you can just upload your file. It's pretty clear. And then the due date, it's back not gonna work. Back didn't work. Da, 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 da. And then again, your due date, it would be seen here, just so you know. And again, I will always say those due dates at the start of live classes. They can be found inside of Canvas. So hopefully that's not too confusing. Okay, so last time through this really quickly. You'll make a monthly budget. You'll have your rows be the days of your month, columns be the different categories. If your rows just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not good enough. Need slightly more detail than just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Columns are your categories. How many categories do you need? At least 6. How do you break them up? However you like. What do you do if you have no expenses? Make them up. What do you do if you're trying to get your parents to tell you your expenses, but they won't? Make them up. If you go online, I'm sure you can find rent prices, home prices, things like that, monthly payments, whether it's $1,000 for this apartment or $1,500 for this house. That could help you get a ballpark idea. Now, let's say you live in a house of 4 people and the rent is $1,600 a month. What you could do is you could prorate that to yourself. So you could say, all right, it's $1,600 a month for 4 people. That means my quote portion of the rent would be $400, 1,600 divided by 4. So you could do something like that. Again, if you're a kid or a brother, spouse, or sister in a situation where you're not earning income, and again, someone doesn't want to actually tell you the numbers. We said that I would love for you to try and prorate some of your expenses, but I did say you must list at least one prorated expense and mention somewhere in the Excel file which one it is. That's a significant point loss if you don't. You have to have your sum column, which is the sum of the days. You have to have your sum row, which is the sum of categories. You have to make your pie chart. That has to be listed as percentages, not dollar values. That chart has to be labeled, not just 1, 2, 3, 4. It has to be labeled rent, food, car, health, whatever. And then somewhere you have to just make a sentence to paragraph analysis of your monthly expenses. I'm not going to take away points if I disagree with your analysis. I'm just going to say, hey, did they write a sentence or a paragraph? Did they actually look at the information they have? All right, cool, full credit. That should be the easiest of these 6 sections to get complete. So again, you'll find your due dates in Canvas. Typically, this is about 5 to 6 weeks after it being assigned. So just please understand that. If we're live, like I said, I will tell you those due dates at the beginning and or end of the class if I don't mention it right now. And if you have any questions, you can always email me about this, but I think everything should be pretty clear and concise. Make sure this is your own work. Make sure you are starting with a fresh Excel file. Do not go to the internet and try and download something and copy paste it. Things will look weird. I'm not grading on like colors and bolding and shading and borders or anything like that. So, you know, gonna put some numbers up here. So Bob turns in his Excel file and he's got everything labeled up here. Everything looks good. And it's just that the whole point here is just the numbers are not bolded, they're not accentuated, they're not colored or anything like that. That's not what I'm grading on. Bob would get 100 if all the formulas are correct, everything's labeled appropriately, they've met the minimum standards. Okay, so Jane does this. Jane has different numbers, but I don't feel like changing them. But Jane decides that she wants everything gridded like this. Okay, I don't care. I'm not grading on that. And then maybe Alex comes in and he decides that he wants this column to be orange, and then he wants this column to be yellow, and he wants this column to be green. Again, I'm not going to be grading on that. You're not being graded on anything having to do with color, outlining, bolding, shading, none of that stuff. You're graded on all the details I have talked about on that sheet. And again, you can download this sheet from Canvas. So hopefully we all understand what is necessary.
And again, your budget dates are March 1st through 31st, so that does include yesterday, but one day behind shouldn't be a big deal. And if for some reason you don't remember what you spent yesterday, if you just end up leaving March 1st blank, how am I going to know that you spent money? I'm not going to be looking at your bank accounts or anything like that. And then we're going to say that this is due on April 6th. Okay, so again, we'll talk about the midterm a little bit more as that topic comes up. But for now, we are going to call it a day. I didn't really see any point to start chapter 4 with all of 10 minutes left of class before spring break. It just wouldn't make too much sense. So we have no excuses not to be getting these assignments due. Go ahead and get them done ASAP. That way you're not putting this off until the last second. Please, for the love of math, don't wait to start your project 2 days before it's due and email me and all this stuff and everything. Please start working on this ASAP, because if you wait, you're going to end up freaking out and having a bad time. So please, please, please start on this project as soon as possible. All right, but like I said, if you have any questions, you can email me. Besides that, enjoy your break. We're going to have some nice warm days here and there. Might be a little windy, but hey, it's supposed to be what, 80 on Monday? Good grief, in March. Be awesome. Just don't get blown away by the wind. All right, take care, everybody.